A word that meant undead.
Nosferatu.
I love me some vampire movies, what with being one myself, but I confess I mortally miss when vampires were creatures of occult darkness, dread, and cautionary analogs for carnal perfidy, you know, like Chris Chan. And 2024's Nosferatu, in its finest refrain, scratches that itch hard. If all you needed to know to pull the trigger is whether or not it's an abidingly atmospheric Victorian horror, consider that argument settled. It is, it's excellent. Go see it. If we're even allowed to hand out Best Cinematography Oscars to people not named Roger Deakins anymore, then Jaron Blaschke, whose name I probably just butchered, fresh off The Northman, deserves one for his career work in this film. The reimagining of the iconic sequence from the original, wherein an unmanned stagecoach impels the protagonist to enter before bearing him off to Orlok's castle, is among the most memorable movie sequences I have ever seen, easily overtaking the previous two attempts for unbridled darksome bombast. Willem Dafoe steals every frame of film, and he ain't even introduced until almost halfway through, after which his character is a quote dispensary.
We have not become so much enlightened as we have been blinded by the gaseous light of science. I have wrestled with the devil as Jacob wrestled the angel in Penuel, and I tell you, if we are to tame darkness, we must first face that it exists.
However, with that preamble established, it ain't without its faults, most of which flow from the excesses of latter-day cinema. Chief among them, blood and boobs. Look, I get that knocking a vampire movie for blood is like bashing a baseball movie for not enough car chases, but it's more the manner of gore that gets me, in that it seems somewhat excessively peppered about to elicit shallow jump scares or outright illustrate something that in other Nosferatu films was much more effectively suggested. Really, the entire approach of this version of Nosferatu seems tailor-made to engineer the impression that Count Orlok, yeah, for the first time in a century, we're done calling him Dracula, by the way, is a hulking occult abomination brimming with satanic malevolence. And while the movie makers sell that in spades, this does come at the unfortunate cost of subtlety, particularly of the creepy Klaus Kinski variety, as stunningly portrayed in the 1979 Werner Herzog remake.
I don't attach importance to sunshine anymore, or to glittering fountains, which youth is so fond of. I love the darkness and the shadows, where I can be alone with my thoughts. Time is an abyss, profound as 1,000 nights.
At the end of Act 1, we traditionally see Jonathan Coombe Thomas creep clean out of his pantaloons by a mounting dread he's unable to name, until at last he accidentally cuts his finger with a knife, bringing out the beast in Orlok Coombe Dracula, after which he awakens alone in an abandoned castle with no memory of the encounter and his bloomers bunched around his knees. This works stunningly well in the Max Schreck original and Klaus Kinski remake, but here, with a demonic entity glowering from the corner of the room, backlit by a blast furnace, his thickly accented intonations reverberating like Shredder from Ninja Turtles, subtlety sallies on out the room, and we never again make its acquaintance till the credits roll.
You will remain and well rest yourself.
I must object, my lord.
You will obey this my counsel.
But, my lord...
Kinski and Shrek's Orlok is crafty, cunning, and imposturous. This Orlok is subtle as a steam shovel to the sternum, and sadly, in places, this does take the wind out of an otherwise atmosphere-rich rendering of a familiar folktale. The mind is the author of all true horror. So watching Renfield bite a dove's dome off like Ozzy Osbourne on bath salts doesn't add much in the way of horror histrionics. Mostly, it's just goofy and gross, and likely included solely to sell the film to contemporary audiences with the attention span of Speedy Gonzales. Then there's the degeneracy, namely nude scenes that have about as much narrative utility as an impromptu tap recital. It's just sort of there, which means it could just sort of not be there and probably achieve a superior effect. Case in point, as with so many Nosferatu remakes, they always seem hell-bent on boning it up with a gimmicky plot twist of some kind. The otherwise exceptional Werner Herzog remake checked into clown college in the final act by making Thomas/Jonathan a newly converted vampire and concluding with a lingering shot shot of him riding over a desert, presumably to convert further vampiric thralls, all without once explaining how being exposed to direct sunlight has enflambéed his frilly ass. This film being made in 2024, naturally said gimmicky plot twist centers not around Thomas, but around a woman, his wife.
Everyone was dead. Father and everyone. The stench of their bodies was horrible. But I'd never been so happy.
Now, I won't spoil the details, but when Ellen/Lucy divulges this prehistory to her paramour out of nowhere, following a slight against his manhood, conducted at crotch level, might I add, they proceed to rut like retards, during which Thomas realizes his wife is not herself, flings himself off of her, and then he cradles her lovingly in his arms as she whispers that she's unclean and he oughtn't to be with her. Point being, you could have carved this entire no-pants dance recital down to just the admission, followed by the embrace, and lost exactly nothing of the narrative. And I find that's the case with virtually all the nudity in this film. In the plus column, all the nudity is portrayed as uniformly degenerate. Degeneracy is unwaveringly portrayed as evil. Evil is portrayed as destined to be destroyed by good, and good is portrayed as the power of Christ and of godly Christian love. This is what I mean when I say it's a superb Victorian horror, not merely the trappings, tailcoats, and top hats of the era, but Victorian morality as well. If you can endure or turn your head during the needless nip scenes, I'd recommend it all in spite of it. Put it this way. A while back, Universal attempted and profoundly failed to launch a Marvel-style multiverse, the Dark Universe, featuring their famed movie monsters. But sadly, the entire creative pregnancy turned ectopic when they chose to launch said cinematic universe with the desultory Dracula Untold, a vapid vampire flick that bites for all the wrong reasons. To make matters worse, they followed it up with an incel Invisible Man and the Tom Cruise cringe factory, The Mummy. Why do I mention this? Because as I lean back and enjoyed the latest Nosferatu remake, for all its faults, all I could think was if Universal had instead offered up a Dracula movie depicted in this dark Victorian style, they'd still be making monster movies and probably printing money like a coked up Alan Greenspan. Because unlike most other movies in the genre for 15 years running, Nosferatu is a vampire film that for once, mercifully, doesn't sparkle, doesn't swoon, and does not suck. I'm Razor Fist. Godspeed.
My God. Now she's dead.
No, she's not.
She's alive?
She's Nosferatu.
She's Italian?